Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the supreme being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of the Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in the Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Announcements by the President.
Honorable Senators, I've received the following correspondence from Her Excellency. By Her Excellency Christine Carla Kangaloo, ORTT, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, to Mr. Josh Drayton. Whereas Senator Dr. Marlene Atts is incapable of performing her duties as a senator by reason of illness, now, therefore, I, Christine Carla Kangaloo, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(b) and Section 44(4)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Josh Drayton, to be a member of the Senate temporarily with effect from the 10th of December 2025 and continuing during the absence of Senator Dr. Marlene Atts by reason of illness, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, on this 10th day of December 2025. Honorable members, a senator is required to be sworn in and take the oath of office. Can we all stand?
I, Josh Drayton, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do solemnly affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Representatives, the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025 in the name of the Attorney General.
The Honorable Attorney General.
Mr. President, in accordance with Standing Order 62-1B, I beg to move that the next stage of the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025 be taken later in the proceedings.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the next stage of the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025 be taken later in the proceedings. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The next stage of the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025 will be taken later in the proceedings. Clerk.
Business, Government Business, Bill second reading.
The Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1102, and for other related matters, be now read a second time. Mr. President, I moved this bill in the other place yesterday evening. I said then that the antecedents, the legislative antecedents, were to be found in the Summary Offences Act of 1921. Overnight, my hard-working public servants, the researchers, were able to discover an ordinance 35 of 1914, which is described as the Summary Convictions Ordinance, which actually does treat with the question of fireworks. So I just wanted to place that on the record, that we are really legislating in an area that legislators before us have been engaged in for well over 100 years. Now, the Act, the Summary Offences Act, has been amended several times, but it has never, beyond the 1914 ordinance, as far as I've been able to discover, it has never been regulated. In the 1914 ordinance, there was one provision which related to the use of fireworks on roads. And those roads was limited to roads in towns. So if you had a road out of a town, then different considerations applied. That was it. But nowadays, fireworks have become a staple which is present in many types of celebrations in this country. From Independence Day to Diwali to Old Year's Night, to private functions, weddings, birthday parties, sporting events, carnival fetes. I'm not sure that all these things, we would always have had weddings, but carnival fetes and the like, perhaps not on the scale that we do today. And fireworks are discharged not only in public events, but also in private parties. The problem is that while they add to the spectacle for those who are celebrating, there are often serious and deleterious effects to persons in close proximity and in surrounding areas. Mr. President, just to put it on record, as I did in the other place, the government is not against fireworks as a whole. But we recognize that the use of fireworks can be harmful to the well-being of families and to persons, particularly younger persons, older persons, and those with health conditions. The fact is that fireworks are not toys. They are, in terms of their component parts, explosive devices. They contain explosive components which are capable of causing injury and have, as I shall demonstrate shortly, caused injury. They're capable of causing distress and damage to property. In its 2021 position paper, the EMA, Environmental Management Authority, stated as follows, and I quote, they say, fireworks are explosive devices that produce beautiful visual effects when ignited. Unfortunately, they also release destructive blast waves of compressed air, toxic chemicals, loud songs, which harm the health of humans, animals, and the environment. What the government does this afternoon is to begin the legislative work of putting in place some structure and order to what has been hitherto an entirely unregulated activity. Mr. President, yesterday in the other place, I referred to some incidents that had been captured in the newspapers over the past few years. Now, without repeating what I said then, I think I should draw attention to just a few of them. Most of us would remember that in 2003, there was a serious incident at a party, a concert in Chagaramas, 27th of February. For those of us who partake in Carnival, I happen not to, but some of us do. I pass no judgment on you. Now, several patrons suffered serious injury at that concert when fireworks, instead of shooting into the sky, arced into the crowd, and a number of persons were burnt, some pretty badly. That was a Marshall Montano concert. In 2015, a 56-year-old man lost several fingers on his left hand when fireworks he was setting off exploded on Diwali night. That's reported in the Trinidad Express of the 11th November 2015. In 2017, a grandmother, Sally Ann Cuffey, was injured when an unidentified man threw a lighted scratch bomb inside of her son's car on the 29th of October 2016. And there's a report in the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday of the 17th of November 2017. Unfortunately, there was a fatality that's reported on the 1st of January 2017 in the Newsday in East Port of Spain. It was fireworks related. In January of 2023, that's recently, 3 businesses on the corner of Nelson and Duke Street in Port of Spain were set on fire early one Sunday morning due to what was described as a fireworks war. I'm not sure what that is, but apparently these things exist. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a report in the Saturday Express relating to the death of a child. Now, it's always a dangerous thing for a lawyer to say that X caused Y, but what I can say is that the report in the Express of the 25th October 2025 describes that the baby passed away. The parents believe that the child's death was triggered by fireworks, and there has been no definitive statement to the contrary up to now. Now, beyond the immediate dangers, fireworks pose a grave national security risk. Their explosive components can be repurposed to construct what I'm told would be improvised bombs, and their deafening blasts mimic gunfire so closely that they may mask the illegal use of firearms. The government promised in the lead up to the election, and has demonstrated since then by action, that we intend to deal with the rampant lawlessness which we have found in our society. We made it clear then, as we do now, that we seek to impose order to Trinidad and Tobago. And lawlessness, Mr. President, does not just refer to criminal activity, which we have taken on head on. It speaks also, and quite literally, to a lack of laws and regulation to treat with various aspects of social and or economic activity. That is precisely what brings us here this afternoon. Now, the work in this area began some time ago. That is the reform work in this area. And it was initially in the hands of the Law Reform Commission, which we've discussed before, is a separate body set up by statute to keep our laws under review. Consistent with its mandate, they undertook, the Law Reform Commission that is, a review of the laws governing fireworks in response to mounting public outcry a number of years ago. The Commission noted that the most critical setback to regulating fireworks effectively was, as they put it, the absence of a specific policy or legislative precedent to begin to guide their deliberations. So the Commission sought, under their mandate, to produce a policy paper. And that policy paper is entitled Fireworks, a Review of the Law. And it was produced by the Commission in 2020. That policy sought to do the following things. One, to explore the scope of the current legislative framework, which was practically non-existent, and the role of enforcement authorities, to examine the major issues surrounding the recent growth in the industry, including the increasing availability and use of fireworks, to examine fireworks regulations and enforcement measures, as they often do in other jurisdictions, such as England, Canada, the Federated States in Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, and South Australia, and also in New Zealand. And finally, to put forward recommendations for a specific fireworks policy, one that met the needs of us in Trinidad and Tobago. Three principal concerns were identified with respect to the use of fireworks. One, the Commission identified risk and danger to life and property. Two, high noise levels causing disturbance. Three, misuse and deliberate use for criminal purposes. The Commission subsequently furnished recommendations in relation to the use of fireworks, which could be achieved in the short term, and prepared a bill entitled the Summary Offences Amendment Bill of 2021 to give effect to those recommendations. Now, that bill went out for public consultations and was also, at some point in time, put into, I am told, a joint select committee. But it did not produce legislation. The Commission has now, at the request of the government, revisited its previous work and made a number of recommendations building on the work done previously, including the comments that were taken in the public consultations and in the Joint Select Committee. Now, these are the current recommendations of the Law Reform Commission. One, they say that we ought to regulate the suggested use of fireworks by introducing a new permit requirement to use fireworks. Two, to prescribe suggested times on public holidays and on December the 31st for the use of fireworks without a permit. Three, to restrict fireworks from being discharged within a half-mile radius from specified places such as hospitals, homes for the elderly, airports, registered animal shelters, and the zoo. Four, to make fireworks offenses ticketed offenses through the issuing by the police of fixed penalty notices. Five, to restrict the use of fireworks to persons 18 years and over. And six, to provide that a video recording captured on a mobile phone, tablet, iPad, or other similar electronic or smart device shall be admissible as evidence. In order to give effect to those recommendations, the Commission revised the 2021 bill, drafted the Summary Offences Amendment Bill of 2025, which Cabinet has approved and asked to be laid and passed. Mr. President, permit me to go through the bill clause by clause. There are just 6 clauses in the bill. As I say, it comes to us by way of an amendment, yet another amendment to the Summary Offences Act. Clause 1, of course, is the short title. Clause 2 provides, it's a proclamation clause, which allows for the necessary regulatory and administrative measures, such as the drafting and adoption of regulations, establishment of permitting procedures to be put in place before the act can completely be brought into force as law. I should just say that there are, of course, provisions which can go in right away. Clause 3 seeks to provide for the interpretation of the word act to mean the Summary Offences Act. 4 amends the definition of certain terms such as fireworks, inserts new definitions such as toy fireworks. As I've said before, I've discovered overnight that fireworks has been a feature of our law since the 1914 ordinance. So in the 1914 ordinance, the definition was quite restricted. It was limited to bombs, torpedoes, squibs, rockets, and something which in 1914 had a meaning. I'm not sure what it means today. Serpents. That's what, serpents, as in the Garden of Eden.
As in the Bible.
I make no comment on that. I know that you are seeking to distract me. Mr. President, I wish to emphasize that within the definition of fireworks, we have deliberately recognized and included the category of noise-reducing fireworks. That inclusion is not incidental, as the Prime Minister said herself in the other place yesterday. It is a conscious effort to signal to a desire in the future, perhaps, to move further to mitigate the harmful effects that traditional fireworks inflict on both people and animals. Clause 5 of the bill seeks to amend the Summary Offences Act by repealing sections 99 to 101 and substituting new sections 99 to 101I. In section 91, we seek simply to provide that a person shall not discharge fireworks unless he holds a permit issued by the Commissioner of Police. The proposed section 100 then provides for the general provisions for permits to be granted to use fireworks. These provisions would include inter alia, the type and amount of fireworks, the location, date, and time. In the proposed section 101, there's a safeguard. Persons who now wish to discharge or use fireworks would be required to notify the fire service. That was in the bill yesterday. I'll speak to how that was amended. This is notification. This is not permission. You get permission from the Commissioner of Police, and then you notify. Well, in the bill which was presented in the other place yesterday, we limited notification to the fire service, but an amendment was made by the opposition, which was accepted by us, to include the Environmental Management Authority, the Civil Aviation Authority, and municipal corporations. The proposed section 101A establishes vital restrictions on the use of fireworks. It addresses the discharge of fireworks on land, ensures that such activity does not create danger or nuisance to others. Equally important, it mandates the supervision of children when discharging fireworks. In the proposed 101B, we introduce essential restrictions on the use of fireworks in close proximity to sensitive areas, such as hospitals, both public and private, national parks, registered animal shelters, and the zoo. In the proposed section 101C, we recognize the cultural significance of fireworks. We strike a balance. We allow their discharge without a permit on specified days. So this is not the Wild Wild West where you can have a party on the 5th of November and use fireworks without a permit. Specified days. Public holidays, New Year's Eve. That being said, there are specific windows of time in which fireworks can be discharged even on those days. For public holidays between 8 and 9, on the 31st of December from 11:30 to 12:30 on the 1st of January, we think that that provision strikes a balance. It preserves the interests of those who wish to use fireworks still, with the overriding concern that we should use fireworks responsibly. The proposed sections 101D to 101H provide for a fixed penalty notice to be issued where an offense is committed under the proposed sections 99 to 101C. Those proposed sections also provide for the following: payment of the fixed penalty notice, filing a notice to contest the fixed penalty notice, proceedings to be instituted where the fixed penalty notice is not paid, and of course the interpretation of certain terms used in sections 99 to 101. Mr. President, we recognize that one of the most critical aspects of regulating fireworks is ensuring that the provisions governing their use are properly enforced. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have charged the police with doing this task. In this regard, we have followed the precedent which is set in England to some extent. In England, the police are empowered to issue on-the-spot fines for the illegal use of fireworks outside permitted times. This immediate penalty serves as both a deterrent and a reminder that fireworks are not trivial amusements, but regulated explosives. The proposed section 101L is another important provision of the legislation. It empowers the minister to make regulations to give full effect to sections 99 through 101C. Finally, Mr. President, Clause 6 of the bill introduces a consequential amendment to the Evidence Act to provide that video recordings captured by mobile phones, tablets, iPads, other similar electronic devices shall be admissible as evidence. We think that that is a practical and forward-looking measure. Mr. President, in the other place yesterday, the other side moved, our colleagues opposite, moved a number of amendments. They added to our I thought I would be able to take the amendments which I see circulating here. They added to our notification the class of persons to be notified, the EMA and the other entities that I suggested. They added 14 days to the period of time in which one has to pay the fixed penalty notice. There was a query on Clause 6, which by consent we did not, I don't think we agreed to it. We changed the word shall to may. I'm not sure that anything turns on that in this context. It was shall be admissible. That does not mean that it shall be admitted. It was so there was a discretion in there, but we took out the word shall and we put in the word may. But Mr. President, all in all, it was a rare day of bipartisan legislative effort in the other place. All of the members in the other place on both sides of the House agreed without dissent to pass the legislation. My colleagues on the other side, as they are wont to do, sought to take some sort of ownership of the legislation. I know that I must be uncontroversial this afternoon, but I would just say that the last work that was done on it was done, I think, by my recollection, in 2020. That means that 5 years would have elapsed without anything being done. I think that's all I want to say now on that. But I encourage the House this afternoon to do as we did in the other place and to pass this important legislation in a bipartisan way. With those words, Mr. President, I beg to move.
Honorable Senators, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to amend the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1102, and for other related matters be now read a second time. Senator Foster Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate on this very important amendment to the Summary Offences Act. And, Mr. President, I must say that it is very rewarding, indeed very encouraging, when the government and the opposition, as happened in the other place yesterday, can come together to pass progressive legislation for good order and business of Trinidad and Tobago. I think the country expects that of us. I think citizens looking on will feel proud of their parliamentarians who they look at usually operating in this adversarial style politics and sometimes losing the opportunity to take collective decisions for the good order and development of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. President, the opposition supports this bill. It reflects the continuation of work started under the PNM administration, including extensive review at the Law Reform Commission and consultations that engage stakeholders, citizens, and experts. The bill before us stands on that foundation, and our position has been consistent, dating after 2020, Mr. President. It is an issue that has developed with some emotion as fireworks has evolved in this country to form part of our cultural behavior. At many of our celebrations, I think the mover of the bill did indicate, and I will repeat, at independence celebrations, which we've all grown so accustomed to in Trinidad and Tobago, and it's our hope that we will not forget to celebrate our independence as a nation. I recall myself taking part in fireworks display in San Fernando. Some years ago, I think the sponsor for those celebrations used to be the Colonial Group. And it took me, at the time I was living in South Trinidad, took me and my family some hours before we could get to as close as possible to the location of these fireworks. Eventually, we did have to stop at one point because it took about more than 2 hours in the traffic and the congestion. What that meant is that there were so many citizens who feel proud to associate with celebrating the independence of Trinidad and Tobago. And so many who, based on the fireworks display, would leave their home and make it a family event. I also recall taking part in similar celebrations in Tobago around independence celebrations. I've not as yet attended the one at the Queen's Park Savannah in Port of Spain, and I'm hopeful that we will return to celebrating independence that so many citizens look forward to. It doesn't take away from the fact, as mentioned by the mover of the motion and contributors in the other place, that it is a industry that needs regulation. And some of the unregulated use of fireworks has caused significant distress to property, distress to animals, distress to infants, distress to senior citizens, distress to the sick. And as a result, the state does have some responsibility to put things in place to regulate the use of fireworks. Mr. President, to some extent as well, as you drive through communities, Diwali, Christmas time, Old Year's night, you see a lot of persons not only using the fireworks display that would light up the skies, but on corners, unfortunately, trying to throw items into moving vehicles, scratch bombs, etc. That is something that cannot be the intended use of these things. It certainly is not safe. And this process of putting these regulations in place hopefully will address these matters. It is not going to be an easy situation to regulate because, while the bill does take into account the question of video recordings and so forth, it is not possible. It's not going to be easy to achieve that objective. And more so in an era where it is so easy to manipulate videos, recordings using AI and all of these things. And some time ago, we passed in this House legislation regarding Stand Your Ground, which certainly a citizen will consider before entering Senator Dan Paul's yard to take any video footage, lest Senator Dan Paul may take matters into his own hands to protect his property from any such citizen. Taking any video footage. I made no suggestion that Senator Dan Paul or any other house owner is not entitled to protect their property. But we must take into account that we did pass such legislation here. In terms of some of the negative outcomes that we have had, one that stands out, and it was mentioned before, but I will crave your indulgence to spend a minute or so on it. Fireworks blamed for Nelson Street fire, January 2nd, 2023, Mr. President. And while it was referred to as a war of fireworks, I suspect that that is a representation of how we refer to certain areas or things that happen in certain parts of Trinidad and Tobago, because I don't imagine if the similar type of incident occurred at another place that it may have been referred to as a war of fireworks. And I'm not attributing the word war to the move of the motion. That is how it was described by persons when the event occurred. But it is really when different factions within the community decide to engage, just as bursting bamboo in California, Cuba, or Chaguanas. Usually these things emerge as one side trying to outdo the other side, one street trying to outdo the other street. And I suppose, as I mentioned with the scratch bombs, that some people overdo. So this may very well have been a situation of overdo. as they try to go at each other in this so-called competition style. But the result, that might be some display of fireworks, Mr. President. But several businesses suffered as a result in terms of loss that occurred as a result of the fires that occurred at Duke Street. Another incident, Mr. President, involved what the parents in October 25, 2025, October 25th, sorry, at the Trinidad Express, where the parents claimed that fireworks terrorized this baby who died later on. At least that is something that we need to take note of. There's one on November 16, 2020, noted in Trinidad Express. Diwali celebrations in Barrackpore turned sour when an infant was injured in a fireworks explosion on Saturday night. The child suffered an injury to the right arm where part of the firework had become lodged. So imagine, Mr. President, the trauma and the stress faced by this family and this infant child as a result of the misuse of fireworks. And December 28, 2023, Trinidad Express, fireworks can cause death. And coming from the lips of Sergeant Ansel Ford of the TTPS, who was on the morning edition program, cautioning citizens about the misuse of fireworks. Mr. President, we support the legislation because we recognize that both culturally and as a matter of practice, that the real harm resides with the unmanaged use of fireworks, which is of concern to owners of animals, to farmers, and to all the other groups I mentioned before, whose peace would be repeatedly disturbed by the unregulated use of these bombs, as they were referred to. One can only look at what happens on Old Year's Night, which outside of Independence Day and possibly Diwali might be one of the frequent use times. As it approaches midnight, you would never know, for instance, that there was so much fireworks in any one given community. Even before the clock strikes 12, you have to check your watch to see whether your time is off, because it shoots off as soon as around 11 o'clock comes. Continuous explosions. One can just imagine what sort of distress will be caused or is caused to persons in that vulnerable group. I see that I think Senator Lewis has put forward certain amendments for us to consider old persons and pensioners' homes, children homes, orphanages, and homes with vulnerable persons. All of these categories, in addition to the ones expressed in the legislation, deserve some level of consideration. And then there is a school of thought that the regulation of this industry should attend itself as well to the purchase and supply side, because the current legislation does not treat with that. So while we are looking at regulation in terms of the permit for use, there is some concern expressed, and I think even in Senator Lewis's amendment, there is some reference to it. A person shall not purchase or discharge So that if we're talking about the question that, or the possibility that these fireworks can be used as improvised bombs, that is a serious concern. And future legislation should take that into account, should look at how do we put in place a process for the approval or permits for the importation and purchase of fireworks, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is all about responsible behavior. And, you know, without the regulation in place, without the process for approval in place, that in itself lends to the type of behavior that has evolved over time. Because before, let me use for an example, right? Within this house, before there was the change from the use of plastic, we would have plastic bottles littering our desks. And when something was put in place, for those of us who have been here for a little while, we all very orderly walk over to the water receptacle and fill our glass of water to adhere to that ban on plastics within the Parliament. And so citizens, as much as some people prefer to operate in an unregulated way, citizens will, understanding that there is now a law in place, move to act responsibly, it is hoped. This permit system will ensure accountability and will hopefully allow for the use of fireworks that many of us have some affection for, including myself, Mr. President, if I must confess. I like a good fireworks. I try not to go close to the discharge of it because I am not trained in that area. Any kind of firework for that matter. Stay away from even firearms or any such thing that I feel might cause some injury or damage. But we have to strike that balance between those who love this as a form of expression and the proper use and discharge of it. So I was quite pleased reading section 101B with the restrictions associated with certain spaces. And some of those spaces include, quite properly so, hospitals, the zoo, national parks, etc. Because we have been hearing time and time again from animal lovers, as some people like to call that group. But we are all animal lovers in one way or the other, and we all should be, because the animals don't have a say in whether you discharge fireworks around where they consider their habitat. It is something that we, as responsible citizens, need to take into account. Mr. President, some of what I had intended to speak on was quite properly dealt with at the other place yesterday, but I'll still make mention of it without detaining us for too long on this rare occasion of bipartisan cooperation. Senator Swartz. The extension of the fixed penalty payment period from 14 days to 24 days is a welcome amendment to the legislation. In addition to, Mr. President, the provision inserted to have an online application process, meaning this modern day and time, this is a welcome improvement, because many areas of government, you can now go online and make such applications. It will make for a user-friendly position. Clause 5, Section 101, subsection 1, and the addition of the various agencies, that is to say the Fire Service, the EMA, the Civil Aviation Authority, and the municipal corporations. In particular, the EMA, well, the Fire Service is obvious. The EMA, in terms of noise pollution, and in terms of some of the harmful effects, smoke. You see fireworks going off, you're seeing a lot of smoke, you're not sure of what other sort of chemicals are being released. And that is why the point of the regulation of the importation is also very important, Mr. President, because we have to know what exactly is being brought into the country. I mentioned earlier, and the move of the motion of the bill also mentioned, if these things can be used to be improvised as bombs and things that can harm citizens, individuals, and property, then we have to look at the importation side of it in terms of what is coming into the country. And so the inclusion of informing the Civil Aviation Authority is also a welcome amendment because, again, for obvious reasons, if these things are being discharged into the air, particularly around areas close to the airport where aircrafts are taking off and landing, that is something that we need to take seriously. And of course, the municipal corporations, based on their familiarity with the various spaces that need to be respected based on the legislation. Mr. President, I did mention before, I'm not sure if I did, but the increase of the payment period on the fixed penalty from 14 days to 28 days was also a welcome adjustment. Mr. President, during the previous term of the previous government, I do recall that on every occasion that some legislation came giving the minister some authority to make regulation or to do anything. The position coming from the opposition was always one of objecting to the minister having any authority. I mean, I don't share that view. We are in opposition now. They are in government. The executive is elected by the people to exercise executive authority, and that is done through the cabinet, and ministers comprise the cabinet, and therefore ministers, in order to effectively carry out their responsibility, need to have executive authority, whether it's the UNC in government, the PNM in government, or any party who the people choose to elect. The question is, how do you use that authority? And it must be used responsibly, and even in giving the minister these very broad powers to authorize fireworks in any place, that is an exceptional level of discretion, which, while, as I said, is necessary, it has to be carefully framed. We recognize that national celebrations, major cultural events, and large public gatherings have become accustomed to using fireworks. And these are the moments when that responsibility is going to be under observation and citizens are going to be looking on. The question then, as I said, is not whether the minister should have the authority, but how the authority is exercised. When we as a parliament confer such sweeping discretionary powers, it is standard practice to pair that power with clear statutory principles. Those principles, of course, Mr. President, serve the public interest by ensuring that decisions are made consistently, transparently, and in accordance with the purpose of the Act. We often hear from citizens their concern about power being exercised in what they perceive to be a partisan way, where questions are asked, well, why applicant A and not applicant B? And therefore, without such guidance, communities may develop the perception that approvals or refusals are selective, uneven, or directed towards particular segments of the society. But it's also necessary for the minister in question to also receive protection by way of these guidelines that I'm referring to. A structured approval framework would resolve these concerns. Basic criteria in the parent statute supported by published reasons or notice requirements, Mr. President. This would make the process predictable for promoters of events, fetes, etc. I know around this time there seems to be a lot of discussion around whether we're going to have the normal types of fetes that we have become accustomed to around the carnival season. These activities start all the way from October, going straight into February, March, depending on when carnival is. Patrons have become accustomed to a particular type of event in the capital city. I understand the government has been advising promoters to utilize shagaramas. I must say, not a fetching man myself, but to traverse in and out of shagaramas when there is an event like that, it's one way in, one way out. And hours of traffic to go in, hours of traffic to go out, something of an emergency taking place at one of these large events with thousands of persons, probably resulting from the use or misuse of fireworks. How, I don't know that there's a hospital in Chagaramas. I don't think so. No hospital in Chagaramas. So that for those patrons, we have to consider how do we address issues of an emergency when we place, sometimes there might be competing events on the same day. What do you do with two large events down at Chagaramas and the traffic associated with that? These are some of the things we have to consider when setting out policy. Quite a bit, we are in the way, in the line of the traffic. Yeah. And that health center that the member is speaking about in Paranage may not be equipped to treat with some of the serious issues that might be associated with a firework incident. We need to take that into account, and the same balancing act that I was referring to earlier on, when you're talking about those who want to use the fireworks and those who are offended by it, it is the same balancing act that I think needs to be employed when we talk about those who wish to take part in our cultural expression of carnival through fetes, and those who are offended by persons offending their public space or their private dwelling home, blocking their, not that we're supporting people blocking people's driveways and all these things. And so, in relation to the point I was making about the minister and his discretion, the framework that is to be put in place will affirm that exemptions are granted on principled ground and not personal discretion. It's not a question of somebody knowing the minister and calling up the minister and saying, you know, minister, help me out or do me a favor, etc. We therefore invite the government to consider including statutory criteria for when an order may be issued under Section 101B2 and to require that authorizations be published in a manner that provides the public with clarity. Mr. President, transparency strengthens the public trust and, as I said earlier, will also work to strengthen the minister's position. It converts discretion into a fair and accountable process that the entire country can understand and rely on. We fully support the shift to a fixed penalty model because it strengthens enforcement and enables the authority to act swiftly and consistently. For that system to function as intended, Mr. President, the penalties must be set in a way that reinforces deterrence, credibility, and fairness. And therefore, that removes the uncertainty in a regime that I think will depend on a lot of clarity. Penalties like this should never appear arbitrary or unpredictable or disconnected from the gravity of the breach. They must communicate with precision that irresponsible use of fireworks attracts serious consequences. That is what over time will inform the behavior of people associated with the use of fireworks. Our concern is therefore structural. How will the quantum be governed? How will proportionality be ensured? How will the public know in advance the scale of the sanction? And that is where education comes in. Education following the enactment of this legislation to inform the national community about what is the process for the application for the permit, what are the fines associated with the misuse, and so that people become aware and people know in advance, and that in itself will help to serve not only as a deterrent, but as a guideline to how persons utilize the previously unregulated area. Mr. President, the regulation, I skipped past some of my previous notes because, as I said, the amendments in the other place helps in me not having to repeat some of what was said yesterday. The regulation of fireworks is necessary. As we know, and as was mentioned several times, it protects newborns, elderly persons with sensory sensitivities, pets, livestock, entire communities that have been robbed of quiet nights. I can only imagine an elderly person, ill, or even not ill, but certainly enjoying the few hours of sleep. Somehow, as you grow older, you sleep less, Mr. President. You may be able to associate with those comments.
One day you would.
It also preserves our cultural traditions by ensuring that we can continue in a safe and respectful way. We support this bill because it continues the work that, as I said at my opening, that was initiated under the term of the PNM government and responds to a genuine public need. However, Mr. President, our support must be associated with some responsible action, and as such, I once again welcome the willingness of the government on this occasion to take on board the views that were put forward by the opposition. We do not offer any additional amendments today, but suffice it to say, it will augur well for us as a country if the government and the opposition can find common ground on a more frequent basis. Quite often, very sound and worthy recommendations would come from this bench, and we would hear reference to other contributions while not taking on board some of the contributions that are made from a good place. We all love this country. We come to this Parliament and to this Senate not because we have nothing else to do, but out of love for country. And therefore, it is in all of our interests, and certainly in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago, that we work when it is necessary as a group to push the development of this country. We must come to the point where a change in government does not mean the abandonment of good work and good policy. And I don't rest that at the feet of the current government. I say it as a broad statement for all parliamentarians and all party politicians in or out of office. Because we have seen it, both in projects, in policy position. You expend monies as a state, large sums of money, millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions, and there's a change of government, that particular project is stalled. And that investment is left there in the ground, unattended. Public servants, citizens, taxes and monies that would have gone into good policy. I myself look on at projects that are left like that, and some of them. I'm from Couva. You're not going to get any objection from me from a Couva hospital. Okay? I come from Couva, and I know the value of having a hospital in Couva. And not because I sit on the PNM bench, I'm not afraid to say that. So I mean all projects that move towards the development of the people of Trinidad and Tobago should not be affected merely because of a change in government. Right? There are many of them. It is almost like a tit for tat. Well, you in government now, that was your project, that's a PNM project. So we're not doing that. Or that's a UNC project. It's not about, everything is not about yellow and red. Right? We seem to attach too much to that. We seem to attach too much to executive office. And how do we behave in executive office, Mr. President? Because there's no security of tenure. I remember not too long ago saying to that side, that's why we are here and you are there. And I've heard many of the members of the government now, parting the same statement. That's why you are here and you are there. Because sometimes when you're in office, you feel that there is some, you're not moving from here. You get caught up in the euphoria of victory and feel that, that you're going to be there all the time. When we make laws understanding that we may not always be in office, and those who come after us must continue the work. So I just want to, once again, as I wind up, Mr. President, say that it is a good feeling. It is a positive sign for those of us who have served for some time, and some of us longer than others, to see. And it is a good signal to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, even on a matter like this, that I consider very important, that the government and the opposition have found a way to find common ground and that we can move to pass this legislation. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Anthony Vieira, SC.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me start by saying, not by, but tri-partisan cooperation. Because I, too, rise in full support of the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025. I do so not merely as a legislator, but as a citizen who, like many, has witnessed the severe and cumulative toll that unregulated fireworks have exacted on our society, on vulnerable persons, on animals, on public health, and on the environment. Indeed, even before receiving the standing order for today's debate, I had started work on a private member's bill to address this very issue. Heartfelt and repeated articles in the press from contributors like Dr. David Bratt, Citizens Against Noise Pollution, and the TTS-PCA underscore how pressing and overdue this reform is. It is important to note, and it is important to place this amendment in context. Sections 99 to 101 of the Summary Offences Act have long prohibited the throwing of missiles, the setting of bonfires, and the letting off of fireworks in towns and public spaces. But this has remained largely theoretical. Enforcement has been weak, inconsistent, oftentimes non-existent. The observance has been more in the breach than in the observance. In 1921, when the Summary Offences Act first took effect, fireworks were small, crackers, scratch bombs, sparklers. Today, they resemble tactical military displays. Heavy rockets, aerial shells, mortars. The escalation is not just in volume, but magnitude, risk, and reach. Indeed, fireworks have evolved dramatically. What began centuries ago as the celebratory burning of bamboo or simple black powder has become a chemically complex, technologically advanced, and industrialized spectacle. Today's fireworks are louder. Aerial shells can exceed 160 decibels at close range, second only to firearms. By comparison, sustained exposure to noise above 140 dBA can cause permanent hearing damage after a single incident. They are more powerful. Today's fireworks are no longer small domestic devices, but aerial projectiles capable of reaching over 400 feet, unleashing massive shock waves and affecting persons within a wide radius. They are chemically complex. The introduction of metal salts and chlorinated compounds now enables displays of vivid color, but at a cost. Residual heavy metal pollution, carcinogenic smoke, and microparticulate discharge into the atmosphere. Ignition systems are now electric, enabling complex computer-synchronized displays far beyond anything that could once be set off in a backyard or an open field. So in effect, what was once akin to celebratory noise-making has morphed into a form of militarized spectacle. Spectacular, yes, but increasingly unsafe and socially disruptive. Fireworks are not merely a nuisance. They are a public health hazard, a source of trauma, and an environmental pollutant. As articulated powerfully by Dr. David Bratt, a pediatrician and public health advocate, the noise from fireworks is not benign. It is, in his words, brilliant, unwanted noise. And its physiological and psychological toll is real. If I may quote from one of Dr. Bratt's articles, promises not kept, in the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday dated 10 November 2018. I quote, "Fireworks are exciting, spectacular, and apparently virile. But fireworks disturb the peace, raise blood pressure, kill animals, traumatize vulnerable citizens, and sometimes kill people. My dogs were driven mad with fear. I had to restrain one in a bathtub. Another voided himself in terror." End of quote. We must listen to such voices, not because they're dramatic, but because they are accurate. Fireworks disrupt sleep, cause anxiety in the elderly and infirm. They can traumatize infants and children with sensory sensitivity, and they can devastate pets and wildlife. I know this firsthand because I have 3 dogs, and every New Year's I have to stay home and give them emotional support. Fireworks are not harmless. From a legal standpoint, the state has an obligation to safeguard the welfare of animals and promote public tranquility. Yet, we hear year after year from the Emperor Valley Zoo, El Chico Poultry Farm, and the local veterinary clinics, all warning of the chaos inflicted by fireworks on animals. Entire flocks of chickens have died of fright. Dogs have been injured. Zoo animals have needed sedation and monitoring. Some have died. This is not conjecture. It is testimony it is evidence, it is consequence. And so I am happy today to be in the Senate and to be a part of those who will rein in what the Honorable Attorney General described as the rampant lawlessness complained of. Some have argued about the economics of fireworks, and that bears some scrutiny. The importation and sale of fireworks consumes foreign exchange. In contrast, poultry farms and veterinary services generate employment and contribute to the economy. Yet it is the fireworks vendors, driven by seasonal demand, who appear to have wielded undue influence over policy. That imbalance must end. The bill before us takes an important and balanced approach. It does not impose an outright ban. Rather, it introduces a permit-based regulatory regime backed by fixed penalties and hopefully robust oversight. Key features include permit requirement. All persons must obtain a permit from the Commissioner of Police before discharging fireworks, and the permit must specify the type, amount, location, date, and time. There's also mandatory notification. The fire service, and as we have heard, the EMA and municipal corporations must be notified as well. There are prohibited zones. Fireworks cannot be discharged within a half-mile radius of hospitals, the airports, the zoo, animal shelters, farms, forest reserves. And children must be supervised. Toy fireworks may only be used by children under direct supervision. There are exceptions, but they are limited. Fireworks may be discharged without a permit on public holidays and New Year's Eve, but as the Honorable Attorney General pointed out, only within tightly prescribed hours. I think, too, that the fixed penalty regime will make compliance easier to monitor and enforce. Violators will attract fixed penalties enforceable under ticketing scheme and deemed complaints under the Summary Courts Act. That will enable swift enforcement without the need for formal arrest. The law of evidence has also been reformed. Significantly, the Evidence Act is amended to allow for the admissibility of video recordings, including those captured via mobile phone or smart device. And so this will allow members of the public to help enforce the law and make prosecution feasible in the absence of police presence. These are sensible, proportionate, enforceable measures. It may be useful to compare the approach taken in this legislation with other jurisdictions and to consider whether there are international benchmarks. Trinidad and Tobago is not alone in facing this issue. Other jurisdictions have acted decisively. In the United Kingdom, fireworks are classified by category. Public use is restricted to specific holidays, and unauthorized sales are criminalized. Fireworks cannot be set off between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. except on designated days. In Australia, most states have banned the private use of fireworks entirely, except under licensed supervision. In India, the Supreme Court has restricted fireworks to 2 hours on Diwali, and only green fireworks are permitted. And in New Zealand, sales are limited to 4 days before Guy Fawkes Day, and public displays require professional licenses. So we are not proposing anything radical in this legislation. If anything, this bill is more lenient than many global models. This bill is not about denying tradition or joy. It is about respecting the rights of others and having due and proper regard for the environment. The right to celebrate must not override the right to health, the right to sleep, the right to be safe. For those who say that fireworks are like fleeting dreams, bursting with color and light, leaving behind a trail of smoke and wonder, I say, love is the only firework that never fades. The Christmas season. In any event, selling and using fireworks is not a constitutional right. It is a commercial and recreational activity, and as such, it is properly subject to reasonable restriction. To quote Dr. Pratt again, your wants stop where my rights begin. My right to health trumps your want to sell and to use fireworks. I could not agree more. The success of this bill will depend on implementation. I encourage the Ministry of National Security, the police, and the fire services to develop clear operational guidelines, a centralized permit application portal, and a sustained public education campaign, as others have advocated for. This legislation must be matched by enforcement capacity and civic engagement. Community involvement, public awareness, and transparency in permit granting processes will be key. The Evidence Act reform opens the door to citizen reporting. Let us support it with procedural clarity. In conclusion, I find that this legislation is both measured and proportionate. It does not outlaw fireworks, but it regulates them sensibly in the interest of public health, animal welfare, environmental protection, and community peace. This is not just law, it is leadership. It is an opportunity for Parliament to say clearly, we hear you, we see the harm, and we are acting to protect our citizens and animals, not just the loudest or most profitable voices. I commend the Honorable Attorney General, I commend the government and the drafters of this legislation. I wholeheartedly support this bill. Thank you.
Senator Francis Lewis, please.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Mr. President, thank you very much. Like my colleague before me, let me declare, and I suspect there are many in this House, declare a potential conflict of interest. I have 3 cats, 3 dogs, and in the not too distant past, it was 5 and 4. And they're an absolute joy. I often ask myself, for whom am I speaking? In this case, it's somewhat easier but harder because I am speaking for those who have no voice or depend on us to look after their welfare. My concern is the time was very short. I only learned about this debate today from last night, and I welcome the opportunity for the debate. The concern I have is that I really would have wanted to do deeper consultations with subject matter experts in this area and to deepen the research so that what I'm about to present is based on what I've been able to glean between last night and today. The first thing when I read the bill is I wanted to seek advice from the AG and the Parliament staff of how does one create a bill that outright bans fireworks. So that's from where I'm coming. And I'm concerned of issues that can provoke. How would such a bill be worded? I'm not sure, but I'm willing to take advice. I read that there's a permit that you're required to get, but then we give a bly. So on some days, public holidays, and 31st of December, you don't have to get a permit. It's kind of, well, either you're doing it or you're not doing it. And this is partly driven by a conversation I had some while back with somebody who is in the industry, makes very good money from it, and saying, no, we like it so. Because the way, and this is their interpretation of the law, is that there is no real restriction on the importation or sale of fireworks, but the public is supposed to get police permission to discharge the fireworks. And that always struck me as, and I hope I'm not using unparliamentary language, that always struck me as cockeyed. It's kind of, it's not supposed to be that way, that you could bring it in, you could sell it, you could buy it, but you can't discharge it. The logic of that always escaped me. The concerns I have of the bill, and let me commend the government. I think the bill is a movement in the right direction. And I'm conscious that in debating this, I want to see this move forward because I think it represents progress, but I also want to see the matter reopened, and I hope the opportunity will be there to do that at some point in the not too distant future. My concern is about location, because it's not just the hospitals. My mother is 93, she's in an old folks' home. And that is not unique to me, that's consistent with many of our members. That should be a sanctuary for our people. And if they are suffering from deformities, Alzheimer's, etc., this thing really drives people crazy. I don't know, I did not see in the bill leading government business, if it could communicate to the AG. Surely there must be a restriction around discharge of fireworks near police stations, all 73 of them, near prisons. I mean, there are sensitive national sites separate from places of vulnerable people that would need some restriction within the bill. Children's homes and orphanages also come to mind. There is a fair amount of the need for public education. And when I see all the signs that go up, Mr. President, particularly in the period between Diwali and New Year's, advertising fireworks, I wonder whether there ought not to be also similarly prominent signs, almost billboard size, that says, this is the law, and if you break it, here are the penalties. And on every sales receipt, if when you buy it and you get the item, you need to be alerted that the law allows its use, but within some very restricted terms. So those are some of the things that I would like to consider, but maybe today is not the time to consider it. So when we come to the amendments I have circulated, I may withdraw it, but I wanted to signal the concerns. The Law Reform Commission in April of 2020, in their report of 2020, stated, and forgive me, I just want to get the quotation right, that fireworks industry provides significant employment. The challenge I have faced, and I have looked, is I can't find the statistics to support that. At the same time, we ask those that are affected, the Trinidad and Tobago Prevention of Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, please quantify the effect of this on the animal population. You can't do that. You can't tell me that this is affecting people employment. I'm not disputing it, but no numbers. And then requiring a set of statistical data that to argue for what? I mean, how do we do that? And I think that fundamentally is unfair. So that the TCPS-PCA have been asked on numerous occasions to quantify the impact on animals. And that's a very problematic request, given the unstructured nature of the animal welfare community. The problem is that while, and I appreciate what the AG said to us, that there have been regulations on the books that they've never been enforced, or not enforced certainly to the degree to which we need it. And I raise the questions with the greatest of respect, AG. What we're putting in the bill, is it even enforceable? And it's not that I don't want it to be, it's just a policeman, a constable, a sergeant, the person in charge of a station, how do they decide to enforce this, which could be difficult. But again, it's ignorance, not a statement of fact. In the Law Reform Commission, they identified, and let me quote them, the inability of the current system to treat with concerns raised against the sale and use of fireworks provides an impetus for reform, which I think the government has taken its cue from. The options for reform are as follows. Uphold the status quo, which I think many you're hearing saying, no, this is not acceptable. Impose an absolute ban on the sale and use of fireworks, which is the position to which I gravitated. Or C, regulate the industry along the lines of jurisdiction that regulate the entire industry through the system of licenses, absolute or partial bans on certain types of fireworks, safety requirements, and the definition of the required offences and the restrictions that we put in place. The Commission went on to say that they're proceeding on the assumption that option C, which is heavier or more clear regulation, is probably the preferred option as reforms are needed to clearly address concerns raised in relation to the industry. And to speak to this industry, there is a lot of money made in this industry. When I looked into it a couple of years ago, margins of 300 plus 400% on the sale of fireworks, margins on the difference between the retail price and the wholesale price were not at all unusual. So plenty money getting spent. How people choose to spend their money is not for me to tell them. But somebody obviously making good money from this. And there are significant companies that are working in this area. I would like, if we had the time, to do the research on how much fireworks comes into the country in terms of volume. How many items? What's the import price and what duties are paid? And at best estimate of what is it being sold at. So we understand, we keep talking about an industry, but I don't have the data as yet to support what this industry is and how many people are being employed. The Law Reform Commission went on to say option B, which is the ban, may be considered too harsh as it will result in the closure of the industry, causing hardship and loss to stakeholders, and citizens will no longer be able to use fireworks for their private enjoyment. That was work done in 2020, 4 years ago. The EMA, again in 2020, October of 2020, issued a report on a public survey on the use and impact of fireworks in Trinidad and Tobago. And their conclusions at the tail end of the report were based on the EMA continuing work on the issue of fireworks. We recommend a ban on importation of traditional fireworks and the promotion of noise-reducing fireworks. And I would urge the government to consider that. The EMA suggested a 100 decibel limit be put on fireworks as a movement towards silent fireworks. They further went on to say, we recommend restricting the release of fireworks in certain specified occasions, and this was in terms of time, which I think the bill has tried to capture. Restricting the time that fireworks can be used, and again, the bill, I think, is moving us in that direction, and at least trying to specify a time. Designating areas where fireworks may not be used, and in fact recommending the discharge being in public spaces. And in fact, many years ago, I believe it was Mr. Minister Sarat Singh, when your opposite number Botuari was in office, he had responsibility for the Chaguaramas Development Authority. And the government of the day had done a lot of work in building out the Broadwalk. And the opening of the Broadwalk was, it coincided with a national holiday. I forget which one. Anyway, so there was a celebration. And one of the really amazing things about it that struck me from that time was that there was a fireworks display. And the fireworks were done on a barge out in the middle of the bay. I think it's Williams Bay. So there was a lot of people around, very much able to appreciate it, there was, as far as I'm aware, no residential issues involved or farm issues involved. And there were a lot of people who were able to see it and certainly enjoy it. And I thought, wow, the use of the fireworks outside on the water certainly was one way to go, and I thought it worked pretty well, as my memory recollects from that occasion. Back to the EMA report, they very much recommended education and desensitization of citizens, as both for the benefit of moving towards noise-reduced fireworks and towards what the fines and penalties be for non-conformance to whatever the laws and regulations have to be. And I think there is a space where some merchants in this area perhaps are using or enjoying the ignorance, and people therefore may not comply with the law, but unknowingly. And that is something that a revised bill in the appropriate time could reflect. There are arguments for the outside ban of fireworks that my colleague and others have mentioned. Safety concerns, public health and noise pollution, the environmental impact, fire hazards, and an encouragement towards safer celebrations. And that requires a cultural shift, and cultural shifts can be difficult. The arguments against the outright ban of fireworks would include, and I do take, and I'm conscious of this because the Parliament has to represent all of the people of the country, cultural and social traditions, some degree of economic impact, although at this stage that's uncertain. There is an element of personal freedom, and I'm very cautious about treading or trampling on that, but even that has a limit. Ineffective enforcement, so whatever we come up with has to be enforceable. And up to now, a lack of acceptable alternatives. But increasingly, other jurisdictions have gone to very different alternatives than fireworks in the more traditional form. So what the bill, I think, is trying to do, and I would urge it to move more clearly in that direction, is a potential middle ground solution on stricter regulations, public awareness campaigns, and I do think the mood is changing, the use of designated zones, and limiting the types of fireworks, including noise levels that as recommended by the EMA. I think it's important to read into the record for this occasion the really sterling work done by two organizations that have consistently spoken on this issue. The first is the Animal Welfare Network in a report of 2017, in which they say, in their report, they receive continual reports of lost and injured animals every year. And this is based on their work from 2001 to 2016, following fireworks discharges, particularly in the seasons of Diwali to New Year's. Additional reports at carnival fetes and independence displays can add to the problem. And the reports come into them from all sources, letters, social media, emails. And they covered pets lost after escaping from premises. That happened to one of our neighbors when frightened by the noise of the fireworks. And the Animal Welfare Network, the network was being sought help to find these pets. Pets injured, and this has happened with us, on our own premises. Pets stuck in burglar proofing. Pets trying to escape and being impaled on a fence and having to be put down, or asphyxiated when chained, or when heads are caught in small spaces. I've seen carcasses on the road of dogs and cats killed while trying to get away from the noise of the fireworks, and they're panicked. And I'm sure others have seen this. And in 2016, the Animal Welfare Network noted there were reports of deliberate cruelty to animals using fireworks, indeed putting fireworks in the mouths of dogs and cats and other parts, often causing fatal injury. That's what the law also has to speak to. So on one hand, there are those who can genuinely say, I enjoy this, it's my right. On the other hand, how does one balance against the deliberate, cruel misuse of this? As I move to wrap up, Mr. President, I would just like to read into the record. This is a letter from Sita Kuravilla, chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. It was addressed to Mrs. Fazina Nazir Mohammed, at the time, or maybe still, director of the Legal Criminal Justice Unit in the AG's office and Ministry of Legal Affairs. And the letter is dated the 21st of January, 2022. So it's not that far in the past. And I'm just going to confine myself to the last 3 paragraphs or so of the letter. And she, Chairman Kuravilla writes, in addition, owners of animals have increasingly protested that they can no longer socialize away from their home, particularly on New Year's Eve, for fear that their animals may come to harm. The Trinidad and Tobago Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals cannot, and this was a statement of that time, this proposed Summary Offences Amendment Bill of 2021 in its current form, as it does little to prevent the indiscriminate use of public fireworks or fireworks on public holidays and New Year's Eve, resulting in great harm to animals, and is unfairly discriminatory to owners of animals who are constrained from leaving their homes during these periods. The Trinidad and Tobago Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals reiterates the recommendations made to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament in 2017 and calls for a ban on the sale of fireworks to members of the public, a ban on the use and discharge of fireworks by members of public, and as my colleague reminded me, it's banning not just the purchase of, but the sale of, because there are 2 sides to that equation. For those occasions of national events, a permit licensing arrangement for the use of fireworks for national events, a restriction on the location and period during which fireworks can be used at national events, and they note national, and a transition to silent or reduced noise fireworks at national events. There are voices being raised based on voices that we need to also hear who may not speak our language, but speak to us as part of our larger community. I recognize that ultimately the decision comes down to weighing, and this is what this deliberative body is to do, the cultural, the economic, and environmental impact and harm. Whether a ban is enacted or not, it will likely involve finding compromise to ensure the safety and well-being of citizens while respecting traditions, cultural and otherwise, and those evolve over time. On that note, I will withdraw for today my amendments. It is in the spirit both of the season, as was noted, but of bipartisanship, tripartisanship, that progress sometimes happens in steps, and one may not always get to as far and as fast as one would like, but I do appreciate the steps that this is seeking to do to carry us forward. And as I started, I would hope, Mr. Leader of Government Business, Mr. AG, that in the not too distant future, we could revisit this matter. I suspect it will need revisiting. My last thought, and this really has to do with the conflict I faced with rights, because we have rights, and those have to be respected. And I'll end with a quotation. I believe it's attributed to the well-regarded, well, that's a few hundred years ago, English parliamentarian Jeremie Bentham. He was accosted by a constituent, and the constituent was complaining to him that the laws that the Parliament was considering at that time were going to infringe on his rights. And Mr. Bentham, I believe, was reputed to have said to that constituency, of course you have rights, however they end at the tip of your nose. others have rights too. I think the government has spoken very loudly and cogently, and I support that. Arbiter Avenue, the noise. How we find the balance will be halting, I suspect, in some instances, but I think it's a movement in the right direction. With that, Mr. President, thank you very much for the opportunity.
The Honorable Attorney General.
Mr. President, I just want to say a few words in winding up. First of all, I'd like to thank all senators because we all had a right to speak. I'd like to thank all senators, those on the opposite bench who have seen it fit today to agree with good legislation so that it is bipartisan in that respect. And of course, the senators on the independent bench who are, as the word implies, independent always and able to speak to merits. Now, their support has meant a lot to us in government so that the bill hopefully will pass with tripartisan support, to use the language of Senator Vieira. Now, having said so, I just want to correct the record on one matter. I see my friend Senator Brown looking at me with an expression on his face, which I'm all too familiar with. My friends opposite have claimed the bill. Now, that is, let's use the parliamentary language, it's an untruth. And it's, I will not say it's a lie.
Don't say that.
Because
Can't say that.
that is unparliamentary. Yes. But it is an untruth. And it's an untruth because the bill died at their hands. And in another respect, I want to correct the record because it is also untrue for them to claim the bill because they were not the authors of this. The authors were the Law Reform Commission. I have given them at every possible step. I have said the Law Reform Commission has done this, the Law Reform Commission has done that. It is an independent body set up by statute, funded by the state, but charged with a responsibility to keep our laws under review, to keep them up to date. It used to be, at one point in time, I clearly recall the days when persons like Justice of Appeal Jean Permanent, Justice of Appeal Gaya Prasad would run the commission, but it is an independent body. And you have to respect its work. And I fear I heard both in the other place and here this afternoon references to PNM legislation and PNM work. And that is nonsense. It is work of the Law Reform Commission. And I want to thank the hard-working civil servants, contract officers in that important department, in their separate unit, for keeping our laws generally up to date, and in this respect for the sterling contribution that they have made to what we are doing. I agree that more work is required. I agree with Senator Cummings that we need to look at the question of sales permits. I agree with Senator Vieira that implementation, of course, is key, but as criminal lawyers would know, I'm not a criminal lawyer by any stretch of the imagination. You have a traffic light at 3 o'clock in the morning. It says stop. There may not be a police officer there to say stop, but that's the law. And we on this side have every confidence that our citizens will obey the law of the land. And when they do not do so, then the mechanisms that we must put in place to deal with those who break the law, well, those mechanisms will kick in. Now, I'm very conscious of the fact that this is a season of goodwill, and my leader has asked me to be very charitable, as he puts it in my remarks. I think I've done that. Mr. President, with those words, I beg to go.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled an act, oh, I apologize, I think my colleague has read long there. Okay, sorry. Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled an act to amend the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1102, and for other related matters be now read a second time. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clerk.
Bill entitled An Act to Amend the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1102, and for other related matters.
The Honorable Attorney General.
Mr. President, in accordance with Standing Order 66-1, I beg to move that the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025 be committed to a committee of the whole forthwith to be considered clause by clause.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025 be committed to a committee of the whole Senate forthwith to be considered clause by clause. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The Senate shall now go into committee of the whole to consider the bill clause by clause. clauses before us in the bill. And of course, we have an amendment that has to be withdrawn at the committee stage from Senator Francis Lewis. So what I intend to do is to go through, because there are only 6 clauses, just take clause by clause, and I think some of my colleagues on the opposition bench would seek some clarification, and the AG will respond accordingly. So let's proceed.
Clauses 1 and 2.
The question is, clauses 1 and 2 stand part of the bill. Do you have any questions? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 1 and 2 now stand part of the bill.
Clause 3.
The question is that clause 3 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 3 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 3 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 4.
The question is that clause 4 stand part of the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. To the Attorney General, just for the record, we have observed that the definition of fireworks retains the concept of silent fireworks. Just for the record, I'm inquiring of the government's contemplation. Is that likely to change in the future? Would silent fireworks receive some different treatment within the government's legislative agenda?
The answer to the question is that the cabinet, the government is now considering the extent to which we can improve the legislation, on some of the deleterious effects caused by noisy traditional fireworks by the use of noise-reducing fireworks. And we anticipate legislative movement in that area. We are looking forward to that.
Is that clause 4 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 4 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 5.
The question is that clause 5
Chairman?
stands part of the bill.
If I may, thank you, Chairman. Is it that you would take the withdrawal of the amendment at this stage and then I make my query, or? Yeah, okay.
So it's withdrawal, and then we'll go to you. Yes.
Oh, beg pardon. Is it at this stage?
Are you withdrawing your amendment?
Yes, I'm withdrawing my amendment.
So Senator Brown, Senator Francis Lewis, rather, you have formally withdrawn your amendment to clause 5 as circulated. Am I right?
I was looking at the bill.
No, I'm saying that you have now formally withdrawn
Yes.
amendment
Yes, Chairman.
to clause 5 as circulated.
Yes, Chairman, I'm withdrawing. Thank you.
All right, so Senator Brown, you can proceed.
Thank you for the recognition, Chairman. Again, to the Attorney General, the government. Under Clause 5, 101C2A, which received some comment during the brief debate, basically allows fireworks to be discharged on public holidays for 1 hour between the hours of 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. Just again for the record to inquire on the government's contemplation of the distinction between what obtains now, where you may have fireworks extended for a period of hours, 5-6 hours on such an evening, to what would be the case on proclamation, which would be concentration of the fireworks for that 1 hour period, and the impact on the vulnerable animals, the elderly, etc. Is that something that the government is firm on and has thought through with respect to its adoption of the work of the Law Reform Commission?
Yes, it is something that we have considered, but we think it is an improvement from the status quo, which allows for the unfettered use of fireworks throughout the day and the night. So we are concentrating within a very narrow time window, and as I say, it's a work in progress. So that's our step this year.
Thank you, Chairman.
The question is that...
If I may, Chairman,
Yes,
just a question, please.
Desiree Murray, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I was just wondering what was the logic behind choosing the specific times of 8 and 9, if just for my knowledge.
Attorney General.
It was based on some sort of research from the Law Reform Commission. They are the ones who suggested those time periods.
Okay. The question is that Clause 5 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 5 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 6.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 6 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 6 now stands part of the bill. The question is that the bill be now reported to the Senate. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The bill will now be reported to the Senate. Attorney General.
Mr. President, I wish to report that the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved without amendments. I now beg to move that the Senate agree with the committee's report.
Honorable Senators, the question is that this Senate agree with the committee's report on the Summary Offences Amendment Bill 2025. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The Attorney General.
Mr. President, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1102, and for other related matters be now read a third time and passed.
Honorable Senators, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1102, and for other related matters be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Division.
Mr. Alaha?
Yes.
Mr. Jeremie S.C.
Aye.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Dr. Swarak Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Maharaj?
Yes.
Mr. Batiste?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Ratiram?
Yes.
Professor Prasad?
Yes.
Dr. Chaitan Maharaj?
Yes.
Mr. Beeg?
Yes.
Ms. Charles?
Yes.
Mr. Zakuru?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Nakid?
Yes.
Dr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Dan Paul?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts Rajman?
Yes.
Mr. Budu?
Yes.
Mr. Abdul Hamid?
Yes.
Mr. Vieira SC?
Yes.
Ms. Chote SC?
Yes.
Mr. Delapat Bastide SC?
Yes.
Ms. Joan Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Murray?
Yes.
Mrs. Lalit Etienne?
Yes.
Mr. Drayton?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Baknesh? Mr. Baknesh?
Yes.
Mr. President, the results of the division are as follows. 30 members voted for. There were no noes and no abstentions.
Honorable Senators, the result of the division is as follows. 30 members voted for the bill, 0 members voted against the bill, and and 0 abstentions. The bill has been unanimously approved.
A bill entitled an act to amend the Summary Offences Act, Chapter 1102, and for other related matters.
The Honorable Leader of the Government Business.
Mr. President, I get the impression that you have something else to do. But in any event, Mr. President, I beg to move that this Senate do now adjourn to a date to be fixed.
Honorable Senators, before I put the question, I now invite senators to bring greetings on the occasion of Christmas 2025. I now invite the leader of government business, the Honorable Senator Darrell Allah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm very happy to rise and bring what has become customary Christmas greetings on behalf of the government bench. Christmas, Mr. President, marks the celebration of the birth of our Lord, And it is an opportunity for all of us to reflect on the humble manner of his birth and the powerful messages of faith, hope, charity, family, and love that are the defining hallmarks of our Lord's ministry. From historical records, Mr. President, Christmas was first observed in Trinidad in 1569, when apparently there were celebrations by 6 Spanish priests who visited several villages where they were treated to local cuisine. And that tradition of visiting friends and family and sharing a meal on Christmas Day still endures. Mr. President, over the following centuries, the celebration of Christmas in these islands evolved to incorporate the customs and traditions of those who came to our islands and made it their home, be it in the food we enjoy, how we share, how we socialize, and of course, our music. And Mr. President, I dare say that the annual celebration of Christmas in these islands is a grand unifier where a nation celebrates together and where we demonstrate unity in diversity. Mr. President, it was the late Parang Queen Susan Maiku who sadly passed away earlier this year. Penned and sung the iconic refrain, "Trini Christmas is the best." And as Trinbagonians, we are known for our generosity, our family values, our love of a good time, our love of a good line, our pikong, and most importantly, our genuine warmth and embracing nature as a people. And so, Mr. President, this Christmas, this season of goodwill, brings out the best in us and apparently has brought out the best in us today. As Senator Cummings said, bipartisan. Senator Vieira said tripartisan, but I think the proper term might just be support of all benches. We're happy for that in any event, and it's brought out the best in all of us. And Mr. President, to my colleagues, I say, let us therefore, during this season, reach out to those who are less fortunate, to the orphans and the widows, to the elderly and the lonely, and let us bring a smile to a child's face on Christmas morning and cheer to a family. And let the message of our Lord's birth bring out the best of us as a people. Mr. President, one of my favorite hymns, and yes, Senator Swatching, I do know some hymns, is O Come, Emmanuel, which Senator Dan Paul was playing in the tea room this morning. We were all enjoying it from his phone. We weren't singing along, but we enjoyed it. And it was a coincidence, because the Latin title, as Senator Swaratsing would tell us, was Veni, Veni, Emmanuel. And there's the last verse of that hymn, which I think is very appropriate to share with all of us at this time, if I may quote it. It goes, O come, O King of nations, bind in one the hearts of all mankind. Bid all our sad divisions cease, and be yourself our King of peace, unquote. So, Mr. President, as we move from labor to refreshment, and that is figuratively, of course, unless, Mr. President, you have anything for us, hidden for us. On behalf of the government bench in this Senate, I wish you, Mr. President, your family, our colleagues on the opposite benches, their families, our hard-working parliamentary staff and their families, and all of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. It gives me great pleasure to join colleague, the leader of government business, in bringing Christmas greetings to this chamber. As a national community, the importance of this Christmas season cannot be understated or underestimated. This is a time of year like no other, and it bestows upon us a season of joy, of peace, of love, and of family. Mr. President, the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ set the timeless foundation for Christianity, for our planet. But it also goes far beyond that and provides the human species with a narrative, a story, a parable, and a lesson of great importance, with truths that have stood the test of time, and with a season of introspection and reflection that is more necessary now than ever before. It is indeed a story of humble beginnings that must have a profound and enduring impact on the world. A story that the innocent must be nurtured and protected. A story that when the large multitude are heading in one direction, just 3 wise men following a star can find the true path to redemption and to deliverance. Mr. President, Jesus' family were migrants. They were migrants. The Christmas story instructs us that Mary and Joseph were compelled to make the difficult journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem because of an order from the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus, that a census of the people was to be taken, and for that to take effect, everyone had to go back to their place of origin, and Joseph's ancestral home was in Bethlehem. After making the difficult and treacherous journey on the back of a donkey, a fully pregnant Mary, accompanied by Joseph, arrived in Bethlehem, and they were told that there was no place for them. All of the inns were full. Because Mary was at full term and would deliver at any moment, an inn owner told Joseph that they could stay in his stable. And Mr. President, within that stable, the only available place for the newborn baby was a humble manger. What is a manger? Mr. President, though it's a common word in Christmas carols and so on, most people today do not appreciate exactly what a manger is. It is a simple trough where food was placed for the animals within the stable. This connects to the absolute humility of the birth of Jesus, who most certainly was not born in a palace or a royal castle. And the manger was also a foreshadowing that Jesus would be the bread of life, according to scriptures. Mr. President, this story nourishes us and fortifies us spiritually to this day. The birth of Jesus is also an important journal of resilience under pressure. When he realized that the Messiah was born, King Herod of Judea implemented a plan to kill all baby boys aged 2 years and under, in a desperate plan to prevent his kingdom from being overthrown in the future. Over 140,000 babies were killed in that slaughter of innocents, but the baby Jesus survived by being taken to Egypt with his family as refugees. Mr. President, out of those difficult and testing times, we can now appreciate together and celebrate the birth of the Lord Jesus into this earthly realm. Each nation celebrates with its own unique traditions, but it is my humble opinion that a Trinity Christmas is by far by far the best. It is a time when Trinis at home and within our diaspora come together. We reunite as families, as colleagues, and as a society. Mr. President, it's a time of joy for us. Usually, the country becomes bathed in light or lights and awash with the nostalgic sounds of celebration, and sometimes with the smell of freshly baked Christmas treats. Barron and Scrunter on the radio, lighting of the big tree in some communities. I certainly recall the community of Diego Martin in my childhood, and the nighttime drive as a family simply to look at Christmas lights when growing up. Mr. President, I remember a time when as children we only saw apples and grapes at Christmas time. It was a rare treat indeed. And I recall the sacred family journey to St. James or Port of Spain to purchase apples and grapes, which were meant to last until the month of January. If you were really lucky, there might be some pear dracks as well. Some of us have childhood memories of sneaking into the kitchen to quietly have a few grapes ahead of the appointed time. Sorrel and ginger beer, black cake, Christmas carols, and sharing old Christmas films with our families, such as The Sound of Music, A Christmas Carol, Home Alone, or for the newer ones, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, or Love Actually, or even Die Hard. It's reputed to be a Christmas movie by some. Sweetbread and pone, chocolates, Danish butter cookies, pastel and parang from Venezuela, Vene Vene Emmanuel indeed, wild meat and punch a creme, and the exchange of gifts and glad tidings among brethren and sistren. Mr. President, the spirit of Christmas is the spirit of hope. It is the spirit of faith, of generosity, and the belief in the value of truth and justice for all mankind. This spirit of Christmas cannot be put on pause or set aside. King Herod was not able to destroy it back then, and no big or little Grinch can do so today. The spirit of Christmas cannot be canceled. The lessons of this season are too meaningful, too enduring, and too important for our national community. Mr. President, it is said that when the night is darkest, that is when we most appreciate the light of the stars. May our nation always have wise men and women. May we always protect the weak, nurture the young, and may the bright star of truth always illuminate our path. On behalf of the People's National Movement, this bench in the Senate, I wish the national community, I wish all senators and staff and their beloved families, and I wish you, Mr. President, and your family a blessed Christmas season and a happy and successful New Year. Thank you.
Senator Candace Jones-Simmons.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. President. Mr. President, honorable colleagues, as we draw near to the end of another year, on behalf of the independent bench, I rise to extend warm and heartfelt Christmas greetings to every member of this Senate, to the dedicated, hardworking staff who support the work that we do, and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. In this sacred season, we return to the biblical prophecy of Isaiah. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. These words echo through centuries, reminding us that Christmas is at the core a divine gift. Christ entering the world in simplicity, bringing with him hope, renewal, and an invitation for each of us to live with greater compassion, courage, peace, and goodwill. Yet, one of the beautiful truths of Christmas is that while its heart is unmistakably Christ-centered, its spirit expands far beyond the boundaries of faith. In Trinidad and Tobago, people of every religion, culture, and background join in this celebration. It becomes a season not only of worship, but of welcome, an annual reminder that unity is possible, that joy can be shared, that light has a way of drawing all of us together. Our local Christmas carries its own unmistakable flavor, its own joyous rhythm, the lively chords of parang, whether traditional or soca parang, fill our communities with cheer. As Marcia Miranda once sang, "My husband gone by his mother and left me in a jam. Look my belly in my hand. Neighbor, give me a piece of ham. Neighbor, oi, 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 give me a piece of ham." Our music captures the humor, warmth, and humanity of the season. Homes begin to sparkle as citizens embrace the tradition of making all things new. Cleaning, repainting, refreshing, symbolic acts that mirror the renewal Christmas invites into our hearts. And of course, the preparation of pastels, hams, sorrel, black cake, ginger beer, and puncha creme. Alongside gatherings with family, friends, neighbors, and even strangers, remind us that we are a people who understand the joy of fellowship. Our customs, simple or elaborate, affirm that at the center of our national identity is community. As we celebrate, we are called to reflect on the values that sustain us: love, service, humility, and unity. Just as the Holy Family found shelter in an unexpected place and were met with unexpected grace, may we continue striving to build a nation where every person feels safe, valued, and included, where no one is turned away or left behind. I pray that the peace of the Christ child will dwell richly in our homes and in our nation. May the coming year bring renewed purpose, wisdom, and courage to each of us as we carry out our duties to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I extend sincere Christmas greetings to you and your families and warm wishes for a bright, healthy, and hopeful new year. May God bless each of you. May God bless our nation. And Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, it is my privilege to join with those who have spoken before me in bringing greetings on the occasions of Christmas and New Year celebrations being observed in Trinidad and Tobago and internationally. As we return to our homes following this final sitting of the Senate for 2025, we do so at a time when the spirit of togetherness, goodwill, and reflection rests gently upon our nation. Christmas in Trinidad and Tobago is not merely a day on the calendar. It is a season that reflects the depth of our warmth as a people and the strength of our cultural tapestry. Across our islands, communities are alive with celebration. Children and adults alike move from house to house, sharing food, music, and laughter. Homes are repainted and refreshed. New curtains are hung, and living rooms glow with the lights that mirror the joy of the season. On our airwaves, traditional carols blend effortlessly with local Christmas classics. And as only Trinidad and Tobago can boast, the sound of parang and soca parang fill the air. Quattro strumming, shak-shaks shaking, and paranderos singing their way through communities, keeping alive a tradition that unites the Latin rhythm with that of the Trinidad and Tobago spirit. Our lovingly prepared Christmas tables tell their own story of heritage. Pastels, ham, sorrel, panchakrem, homemade bread, ginger beer, turkey, and fruit cake, steeped in the months-old spirits. These flavors remind us that Christmas is a season of sharing, gratitude, and connection. But while the festivities delight us, we must also recall the deeper meaning of Christmas, the birth of the Christ child, and the message of hope, compassion, and divine love that he brought into the world. As Senators Joan Simmons reminded us earlier, Isaiah 9:6, chapter 9, verse 6, reminds us, "For unto us a child is born, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." These words speak the virtues that transcend culture and creed. Whether we celebrate Christmas as a religious observance or as a treasured tradition, the values of goodwill, service, charity, and unity remain universal. And so, honorable senators, as we enter a time of merriment let us also pause to reflect. Let us give thanksgiving for the blessings we have received throughout the year. Acknowledge the challenges that we have overcome and recommit ourselves to working with purpose in the coming year. Let us also remember those among us who may be struggling, those facing loss, hardship, and loneliness, and extend a hand of kindness and friendship wherever we can. As we look toward 2026, may we do so with renewed resolve, strengthened community bonds, and a shared belief that our nation's prosperity is built on our shared humanity. I leave you with a joyful reminder from one of our own cultural treasures, singing Francine, whose timeless lyrics teach us that renewal, generosity, and goodwill are not distant ideals, but actions we can begin right where we are. As she reminds us, and I quote, "The signs are here. All should kneel in prayer. Let's take him at his word." The Master said, "The time to start is now, beginning on Christmas Day." End of quote. And so, honorable senators, in the spirit of joy, in the spirit of community, and in the spirit of peace amongst humankind, please allow me, on behalf of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, myself and my family, to wish the people of Trinidad and Tobago a peaceful Christmas Day, filled with merriment and a bright and prosperous New Year. Season's greetings to all senators and their families, to all members of staff and their families, and to all our parliamentary police officers and their respective families. Thank you. Honorable senators, the question is that this Senate do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This Senate now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.